Keegan Longira, adventurer, motivational speaker, world changer. You're about to join Keegan on his incredible cycling expedition from Cairo to Cape Town. Relive with him every moment, encounter, and emotion of this amazing journey. This series is available in both audio and video.
So Keegan, the 2nd of January was actually the beginning of your actual cycling trip. Am I correct?
Yes, yeah, that was the first day, 2nd of January.
That's when you got onto the bike?
Yeah.
Okay, so give us that day. I mean, how did it start?
I remember waking up at about 4 in the morning, hopping out of bed, putting on the cycling gear, the gear that was on my bed from the night before, putting that on, looking at my bicycle and just thinking, wow, that thing looks heavy. I mean, it had all my things that I was going to need for that day and the weeks to come. Sure. And just took a final video and picture of the Cairo Tower. Sent a WhatsApp to everyone with a picture of the bicycle and me leaving the room. And saying, here we go. This is it. I remember slowly walking down the passage in the hotel. Just the wheels turning over. It was the only sound. Everybody was asleep. Going into the lift, lifting my bike on its back wheel so that it would fit in the lift, and then getting inside and the door nearly closing on me. And just having this feeling that surely there's something else I need to take with me. Don't I have a bag or something like, surely I'm coming back to a place. And it's the strangest feeling ever, not having a place to go to. You don't know that your destination is in a day's time or 2 days or 3 days. Like the destination was South Africa. So for me, that was mind-blowing. Got out of the lift, walked past the reception, gave the guy a polite little wave, and I think he was just so confused to see this massive bicycle passing out a 4-star hotel, in the middle of Cairo. And went out the door, the taxi driver was there, greeted him. He was in like a white Taz. It looked like a Taz. And he couldn't speak a word of English, so I was just like, well, I know the route, I'm just going to head out. Put my bicycle lamp on, dark in Cairo, and then just started cycling. Sure. And I just remember that rush, that cold wind in my lungs, the smells, the fumes, that cold air on the skin, and just hearing the chain and the wheels turning over was an amazing feeling. I felt like I was on top of the world. Just going and 10Ks ticking over, and then 20Ks. And then, the sun starts coming up. And, then it gets a bit busy. There's all the trucks and the traffic starts. But eventually I started to get onto the outskirts of Cairo and into the industrial area. And things were getting a bit dodgy. There's people walking around now with guns and that. So, it just gives an indication of the sort of area you're in. Cycled past, and there's just stray dogs everywhere on rubbish dumps and in the streets. And a lot of them, as you'd cycle past, would come and attack you and try to bite you. And I have this massive fear of dogs. Before I left, I have absolutely no fear of dogs now anymore. But I mean, before I left, it was one of my weaknesses. So it was quite scary to have 10 to 12 dogs a day trying to attack you. Yeah, and I remember going out and cycling up this, quite a climb, not too intense, but up this climb over the hill and looking down to, they call it the border of Cairo, it's almost like a toll gate, so you pay money to get through there. And cycling up to this toll gate, the taxi driver's behind me. And as I'm approaching the gate, this guy dressed in full military uniform just runs into the middle of my path, pointing a gun at me, and his other hand in the air, so like an AK-47, just like, stopping me. And I thought, it's over. I thought, you've come 40 Ks or 30, 40 Ks, and this is the end. It was fun while it lasted. Day one Here's this guy standing in front of me, and I've never looked down the barrel of a gun. And this thing is like inches from my face. And he's just shouting at me in Arabic. The taxi driver doesn't understand any language. And the only thing I could think of was doing was, getting my phone out and calling Salma. So I got my phone out, called Salma, put Salma on the phone to this guy, had a long conversation. All my airtime was finished after that. Got the phone back and spoke to Salma, and I was basically like, Salma, what the hell's going on? And she told me that they're doing military training exercises in the desert. That you can't go through there. Like it's illegal. You can't go through there. You can't get a little bit of an insight into the military training, what they're doing. So I was shocked, first of all. I was like, sheesh. And then it struck me. I need to cycle back into Cairo now and out on a different road. So my first 80 kilometers of the first day on my trip, I was already behind world record pace, and that was stressful. That was very stressful.
So break that down for us. So is that 40 Ks to the border and then 40 Ks back?
Yeah, 40 Ks back into Cairo, start all over again. It was heartbreaking.
And then what?
I got back and the traffic was, by then it was bad. And, looked on my phone, on my maps. And I remember Salma saying that I need to go to Suez and onto the Red Sea, straight from Cairo. So I downloaded the map and found the quickest road out towards Suez. And within 25 to 30 Ks, I was on the desert road. It was like a massive highway on the way to Suez. And when you get to Suez, that's where the Red Sea basically starts. And I remember hitting the 100-kilometer mark on this road and taking a photo of it and taking a selfie and, sending pictures back home and sitting on the side of the road in the desert sand and taking photos and eating like some bread I'd stashed away in my bags.
Keegan, you talk about 100K mark as if it's like, okay, we jumped from 0 to 100, as if that's nothing.
Yeah.
Okay, for us ordinary people that they can't even cycle 10Ks. Okay, so how difficult was that first 100Ks?
It was really flat. The wind was at my back. It was a breeze. It was really easy cycling. I trained well, so 100Ks was nothing for me. But hitting that 100K mark, triple figures on the first day, I was like, wow, take a picture, send it back home. And, I just remember the response. And the response was hardly anything, My mom was at work, my dad was at work, Paige was at work, my sister was at school, my other sister was at work. Nobody was replying. I just felt so alone in that desert. And then I think that started to sink in for me that this trip was about me. It was for my own, the own things that I wanted to accomplish in my life. And sometimes you don't need a pat on the back for anything you do. So I think that was a turning point on the way to the 100K mark. And then from there, then I had some decisions to make as to where I was going to cycle. So this day was going to turn into a big day on the first day. I was planning not to do such a massive day, but I was already behind. So then I got back on the bicycle after like a little lunch break, cycled through, amazing. It's dead in the desert. You just hear the wind. The sand blows on the road. The cars start to get less and less and less. So I went through a toll gate and into the town of Suez, and that was the first town on the way.
Keegan, I'm thinking about that taxi that was following you.
Yeah.
Was he still following you? Or
No. So
you were alone now?
Yeah, no, I was completely alone. So about 5 Ks or so out of Cairo onto the Suez road, I was alone. Which was a cool feeling. It was really cool, it's not great to have somebody behind you the whole time, almost checking up on you. Yeah, so I was alone. And I remember coming into Suez, and it was a Friday. So they were having their prayers, and a lot of the streets were deserted. And I was coming down this long, straight downhill into the town, and you could see the Red Sea from there. And this car just pulled up behind me, like a red Polo. It looked like a Polo, I'm not sure if it was, but pulled up behind me and just started hooting, going mad, and then pulling in front of me down the road, and then stopping, slamming on brakes. So I rushed out, to get into the middle of the road so I didn't crash into it, carried on cycling, and this guy pulls up next to me, and he's just the most casual, relaxed guy I've ever seen in my life. He's just got this flat rapper cap on, and he's, one hand on the steering wheel, other windows down, and he just calls to me, and he's like, stop, a cyclist, I'm also a cyclist. I was like, okay. So I stopped, and he pulled out, and before I could even get to know his name, he's taking photos of me. So he's going mad and walking towards me, taking photos, he's taking selfies, and then he's really tall, lean guy, puts his hand out and shakes my hand, and he's like, my name's Didi. So I'm like, oh, cool, nice to meet you, I'm Keegan. And we started chatting, and it turned out he was a Egyptian professional cyclist. So what an honor on my first day to meet a pro cyclist who's stopping to take pictures of me, and he's telling me what a great thing I'm doing, and he can't imagine cycling to South Africa. And it was just so refreshing to meet such a friendly guy in a place that hadn't been so friendly to me up until then. And Didi took plenty of photos of me, posted them on Facebook, and got in touch with me on Facebook and added me as a friend, and added my friends as friends, and it was just like such a pure-hearted guy. It was great meeting him. And so that was Suez. And
at this point, what are you drinking? What are you using to sustain you? I mean, did you have enough water on the bike? Did you have to stop anywhere to get water?
There weren't any places to stop on the desert road, so I'd packed all my water in my bag. So I had 2 1-liter containers, and then another 2-liter container, like one of those army canteens almost, a 2-liter one of those. So I had 4 liters with me on the bicycle, and then I had 4 bottles. I had 2 bottles on my frame, 2 750ml bottles, and then 2 behind me. And then I had 2 bottles behind me on my seat post. I had a clamp, 2 bottle clamps there. So by that time I'd finished all the bottles on my bike, and had already filled up some of the others. I had rehydrate sachets that I was using. I had hydration tablets. I had water purification tablets that I'd put in the night before I had left. But I did when I got to Suez, I stopped at a small petrol station there and just filled up my water to put into my bags, the main bags, and just put some purification tablets in there. So the water, that was my biggest concern. Just after Suez, I took my first protein shake there, just because I knew I was going to be sore the next day after putting in such a big day. I think the stress of being behind the world record pace just pushed me, and I really pushed hard on the first day. So I had a protein shake there and ate some of my corn nibs from South Africa, and that was just awesome, to put something in South Africa. I hadn't been on the road long, but to taste something that reminds you of home was awesome. So I ate some of that corn, and the Suez is a massive industrial town with ships and containers, and it's just like a harbor. I was shocked at how big this place is and how many ships were coming in on a daily basis. And I carried on, and cycled. And it was probably about 30 k's or so from my destination for the first night. The sun started to go down quite quickly. And I was quite stressed about where I was going to stay. And arrived at this little town. And I remember seeing there were 2 hotels and nothing else. And I looked at the price of the first hotel, and I looked at the price of the second hotel, and there was like a 50 Egyptian pound difference. So I was going to be staying in one of those. If not, I would need to camp at somebody's place. And I didn't want to spend that sort of money on the first night, on the one hand, but on the second, like in another way, I really wanted to be comfortable and just get settled and have a good meal on the first night. So I cycled down this long driveway towards the hotel, and there was a boom gate before. The security guard let me in, and I cycled down and got to this place, and it was magnificent. It was just, pools and palm trees and, like a holiday destination, and went in there. And I chosen this place because it was a little cheaper than the place next door. Got to the reception, and I just felt like I was treated like dirt. I mean, my bicycle had to stay outside. I walked in, I was dirty. The sand had been blowing me the whole day, and the sun, it stuck to the sun cream, so it didn't look, very clean. And I remember speaking to the lady at the reception, and she didn't speak any English, and basically gave me the price and told me I needed my passport, a copy of my passport, to be able to stay there, and the amount of money I needed. So I left there, cycled it back out towards an ATM and a little roadside store. And you must remember now, if I can just put it in your mind, it's just desert. So it's desert and this amazing place. So it's you're scared to camp anywhere. And I got to the store, drew the money, had some difficulties with one of my cards, so used my other card. I got the money I needed for the night, went into the little store, bought some bread, and they've got these amazing cakes in Egypt. It's like a chocolate, almost like a Twinkie sort of mini cakes that they make. And it's in a clear plastic wrapping. And I bought a couple of those, shoved it into my bag, and spoke to the owner there. Very old man sitting in a chair in front of his store, reading the newspaper. Also here, very educated, and I chatted to him, and I asked him if I could maybe camp on, in his shop or around the side of his shop. And he was shocked that somebody would ever ask him something like that. And so he said, no ways, it's not safe to camp, to stay in the hotel. And I told him, that's too expensive. Can't I just stay in your shop or something like that? Open for me in the morning and I can be on my way. And again, he refused. But he was such a respectful guy, stood up when I spoke to him. And he was much older than me. And I then headed back to the hotel, booked in. I remember them telling me I had to keep my bicycle in this room in the back of the reception. And went up to my room and just, lay down on the bed in the room. All my dirty clothes, carried some of the bags up to my room. I was just relieved to be at a place where I could have some time alone, but also thinking to myself, if this is how much I'm going to spend on day one, there's no ways I'm going to make it to the border. So I remember then I got settled, had a shower, put some clothes on, t-shirt and my shorts, and then that big jacket, because it was still really cold. Even though it was in the desert during the day, it was cold. It was wintertime. Went downstairs for dinner, and they had this massive buffet dinner, and I had all sorts of meats and breads and desserts and coffees and things like that. I thought this is going to be an amazing trip. And then got all of that sorted, went back up to my room, and every night I used to take my map and just fold the place that I'd been. And this became a really significant part of my day, to get up to the room and take this massive map and just fold a little bit, a couple of centimeters, and just fold it over and say, I've done that part. And then folding the map and looking at it and planning what I had to do the next day.
Wow.
Yeah, and for me, just folding that map was so important, because I knew, just take it day by day. Just get to that point, fold it over, and carry on. yeah, and that was my first day on the road.
Okay, Keegan, so day 2. But before you tell us about day 2, how many kilometers roughly did you do on day 1 cycling? I mean, just a rough estimate.
I think a rough estimate of the day was probably like 190.
190 Ks.
Could have been over 200 Ks for the first day.
Was that on track with world record time, or were you still behind?
Sure, I was behind due to the fact that even though I'd cycled 200 Ks, in theory I should have cycled 140 to get to the place where I actually was now. So because I had taken that extra bit, there was almost 60 or so Ks that were lost. So it was really stressful. I should have, for 200 Ks, I should have been way further down the road.
So you started day 2 still behind?
Still behind.
Okay, so give us that day.
Well, I'd stayed in an amazing place. Gone downstairs in the hotel, got my bike out, put my bags in the bike, put my headlamp on, put another headlamp on my handlebars, and then walked out into the dark. I cycled up this long stretch of road that towards the security gate of the hotel, over a couple of speed bumps. Got out onto the road. First couldn't figure out if I had to turn left or to go right, and eventually turned left and headed south. Cycled probably 10 or 15 Ks it was pitch black. I remember cycling, just hearing the sound of my breathing. And then I started to get up some speed and momentum for the day, and as I was getting a little bit confident, I heard some barking. I was looking like frantically left and right where the dogs were coming from or where the dog was coming from, and then I heard a couple of big barks like on either side of the road, one on the left, one on the right. Now it's pitch black, you're cycling, you have no idea where these dogs are coming from. And then I just heard running, like dogs running at me from the left-hand side of the road and the right-hand side of the road on the sand, like the sound of scratching sand on the tar road. And I was terrified. I just started sprinting. There I was in Egypt, cycling as fast as I can, dark, nobody's around you, cycling away from dogs. Didn't know how big they were, didn't know how many they were, didn't know where they were coming from. But again, it was almost like something I needed to learn. My biggest fear was dogs. And for 2 days in a row, dogs had, sure, it was crazy. So, kept cycling. Eventually, the dogs stopped running and I was through and, cycled along the coast. Still dark, couldn't see the sea much. And then, wow. All of a sudden, the sun just started to rise. And remember looking at the ocean and just seeing the amazing colors, the orange and the reds and the sunlight over the water, and seeing the sand, just desert around you, and the most beautiful sunrise I've ever seen. Stopped for a while, took some pictures, sent them back home, carried on, had a bite to eat, some bread that I'd taken from the buffet dinner the night before. And kept riding and just pushing the kilometers, see how far I could get in that day. Then I remember getting to also like a little touristy town, a lot of resorts and shops, and passing through the town and starting to go down this long downhill. I was going down this downhill and it was quite a couple of bumps. And I hit this one bump and I just heard the bike, something was wrong with the bike. I just heard this horrible scraping sound and I could almost feel my back wheel wasn't right. I just heard it like scraping on my back wheel. And I slowed down as quickly as I could. I looked, like between my legs down at the bicycle and saw my bag was like completely on my wheel. And I stopped and pulled over to the side of the road. looked at my bag, and I was just like, are you kidding me? Day 2, I haven't even been on one bump. The first bump I go over and this bag is finished. And I took the bag off, all my bags, and had all my tools in the one bag. Took my tools out because I knew there was something I was going to need to try and fix at least. And looked, and one of the screws from the bicycle rack had just fallen off and was gone. And I mean, it probably carries like 50 or about 10 kgs each bag. So now 10 kgs of luggage, I'm thinking to myself, what am I going to do? I'm going to take the luggage from that bag, spread it across the other bags and carry on cycling. But then the balance is off, can cause trouble with the wheel alignment, even the axle and things like that. Things could go horribly wrong. I was just panicking, and I'm like, sure, I'm already behind world record pace. And this is like the worst thing that could have happened on day 2. So I eventually figured out that if I use cable ties tight enough, I can get the rack back together. And there's a bracket that connects the frame to the rack, and then the rack is connected to the axle of the wheel. So there was that missing link, and it was causing the whole rack to be pushed sideways. So I put that rack in alignment again and put about 5 or 6 cable ties through, pulled it nice and tight, cut the cables, put the bag back on, and just hoped for the best for the rest of the day.
So Keegan, from there, where was your next stop? Once you had gone back on the bike and managed to sort out your rack, was it a lot of open road until you could stop and check again? Or was it close by?
No.
Where was the next town?
I think I still had about 80 kilometers left to do in the day. So it was still a long stretch to do. The wind was pumping at my back, so I was really flying in the desert. So the speed was good. So I pushed and realized that I could probably sleep in a town called Ras Gharib, in also a very industrial town. I remember getting to the town and having to go cycle into the town, turn around and cycle back towards the place, or back towards, the main turnoff for the town. And the wind was just, when I turned into that wind, I thought to myself, if I was cycling against this wind, I probably wouldn't have been able to do 100 Ks in the day. And I cycled into the town, and another completely new experience for me. There was Arabs all over in the roads, jumping in front of me, shouting at me, really arrogant and rude kids, like mocking to slap me and to, kick my bike and things like that. And it was just it felt like a heavy place. I didn't feel good there, and I was worried about where I was going to stay. And I had an SMS from Salma. Salma had sent me a message during the day of a possible place to stay in that town. And it was the only place to stay in the town. So it's a really tiny, tiny town just off the coast. And the job was to provide workers on all the factories and industrial places, all over in that area. So I got there and asked for directions from some random guy on the side of the road. And luckily he could work out where the place was. And I followed him in his car, and eventually we got to this little guest house. It was very small, but it was quite tall. I remember there was five stories or something like that. And I walked in and made my booking. And again, the process in Egypt is to give your passport and give your passport, pay your money, get booked in, and then make your way to the room. And the room wasn't ready. Didn't look like they had a lot of tourists and things like that. I think the people that stayed there actually worked there. So I remember carrying my bicycle and with all the bags up these 3 staircases and just being so tired. My knees were starting to hurt, my quads were hurting, my hamstrings, my ankles. I was just really tired on day 2. Got into my room and had a quick shower. By that time, there was no warm water. For the rest of Egypt, there was no warm water, and that was horrible. There was no Western toilets anymore. It was getting really into the rough places, if you could call it that, of Egypt. in a cold shower and just washing myself, getting out, getting dressed and going back down to the reception to ask where I could, maybe get some food or something like that. And, seeing this big, tall guy sitting in front of the TV in the reception area. They were watching a old Egyptian football match. And he could also speak English, and he offered to take me to the local supermarket. So off I went, with this guy. I didn't have any tackies or anything with me. It was all flip-flops that I was wearing. So even though it was cold, that's all I had, flip-flops. And walking in the sand in between these streets and just getting this, the real Egyptian culture around me, very dull buildings, not much glass windows. The buildings are really rustic. And got to the supermarket and I needed protein badly. Really had to get some protein. And I saw a bit of polony in a packet in the fridge. And I asked, my friend also Mohammed, who had offered to take me to the store, about, the meats, and he loved it. He grabbed a couple of, packets of the meat. I remember taking this meat and looking at it and thinking, yes, if this is what I have to eat, it's going to have to be done, but I hope I don't get sick after this. And then later, went back to the room and we had some salty cracks sort of things, and opened this bag of polony in my room and nearly passed out. I mean, I just smelt this thing and it just was in my face and I nearly vomited right there. And I looked at this stuff and I thought, if I eat this, I'm not going to make tomorrow. So I just chucked it, chucked it out the door. There was a dustbin on the outside of my door, and chucked the polony in there. I just remember that room so well because, I'd had problems with my bicycle that day. So I'm trying to repair things on my bicycle. Bicycle's turned upside down in the room. Fixing things, I'm tightening screws, I'm oiling the chain. And on the other bed is there's 2 single beds in the room. Got all my luggage just across the bed. Trying to figure out what I need to wash, how to pack the bags for the next day. And then again, taking my big map on the bed, drawing where I'd gone for the day, and then just folding it over and just thinking to myself, another day done. Put that, the map back into its plastic sleeve, and that went on my handlebars every single day. So that was basically the day. But I remember being worried again about leaving the next day. It's every time you get to a destination, you're happy for about an hour that you've reached the place. You fold your map, you're happy, and then the stress starts to come over you again, like worrying about the next day. And I remember a Bible verse that kept coming up. Brent was sending me Bible verses, and one of them was, don't worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow has its own things to worry about. I remember never ever being able to understand this verse. How can you do that? How can you worry about that? And then it's this verse in the Bible about not worrying about the next day. And Brent sent this to me on a couple of days. And more than ever, I couldn't understand that verse. I was like, God, here I am in Egypt. A significant place in the history of the Bible. How can I not worry about tomorrow? How can I not? I don't understand what's going on. Every day I get here, I'm stressed about the next day. I cycle, I work hard, I wake up the next day, and that stress comes all over again. So there was a lot of things that I needed to work out in Egypt. And I remember before I left South Africa, having these dreams about Moses. I never, not physically seeing him in a dream, but having these reading verses about Moses and reading books about Moses. And I remember asking Ryan, one of the pastors, about Moses and what did Moses mean to him. And I remember asking various people, why do you think I'm thinking about Moses so much? And when I was in Egypt, I still didn't know the answer to that. But I kept asking myself, Moses had a lot to do with, he was in Egypt, but the idea was to get out of Egypt. So what I felt like is that there's things that I need to learn that, thousands of years ago, the same things that Moses went through. And here I was cycling along the Red Sea. And for me, there was always there was a physical battle happening every single day. And there was a spiritual battle happening, and a battle in my mind and a battle in my heart of lessons that I needed to learn. But early days, day 2 was over and I was stressed for day 3.
To find out what happens next on this amazing journey, go to www.keegan.co.za to purchase the next chapter.